Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 26 series, Rescue the Rockies. And we have made it to the 2031 first year player draft. As we sit here getting ready for the draft, we are 53 and 36, tied for first place in the National League West with the Los Angeles Dodgers. As we often do, we've gotten a lot of good feedback from the worldwide scouting department on what our approach should be in this draft. I'd say if we look at that feedback overall, there's probably three key takeaways. Overall, the worldwide scouting department prefers we take a pitcher to a position player. And overall, there is one player that is strongly favored by the worldwide scouting department. But perhaps most importantly, the third and final analysis from the worldwide scouting department is that it's a pretty unimpressive / mediocre / meh pool of prospects that we have available to us here with our first pick in the draft, which is number 35 overall. And as we prepare to make that 35th pick, there's 10 players that I've kind of honed in on along with the worldwide scouting department that are near the top of my list. 6 position players and 4 pitchers. We'll talk about the position players first because overall that was a somewhat less popular area for there to be top choices from the worldwide scouting department. One is shortstop Mike Diaz. Diaz is projected to go 33rd overall in the draft, so he just should have come off the board. Like the high contact and gap power combined with the good speed, like the durability, the glove is not particularly impressive. Don't love the low leadership and adaptability, and don't love the potential below average power and the potential well below average eye. Diaz ultimately was not the top choice of anyone in the worldwide scouting department or myself. And the next 3 position players we talk about are similarly positioned, and that although they were mentioned from time to time, nobody had them on the top of their lists. Jeff Cheshire, who is also projected to be off the board at this point. He was projected to go with the 28th pick in the draft. Another player who's durable, really like the personality with the high adaptability, work ethic, and baseball IQ. The fielding looks awful. The home run power and the eye are both incredibly tempting, but the below average contact and the potential well below average strikeout rate that he's going to put up are both concerns. Another middle infielder and shortstop, Kei Ono. Better glove than some of the guys that we've talked about. Really good contact hitter who's kind of meh at everything else. And similar to Diaz, who was the 33rd pick in the mock draft, and Cheshire, who was the 28th pick in the mock draft, Kei Ono was also expected to have just recently come off the board with the 31st overall pick in the draft. And the last shortstop, or more accurately middle infielder that I'll mention, who didn't really get any number 1 votes, is James Stangler. He's projected to go with the 26th pick in the second round, so maybe he ends up being an option for us come round 2 if he lasts a little bit longer than expected. The college player out of San Diego State has a more balanced potential hitting profile than some of the younger players that we talked about, but neither the speed nor the glove are particularly impressive. Does have good work ethic, but he's not particularly highly developed for a college player, although to be fair, he is just barely 21 years old. There were 2 position players who were somewhat more highly regarded by the worldwide scouting department. And what that means is they each had one person propping them as their top selection. The second baseman, Justin Van Ostren, was mentioned by a few members of the worldwide scouting department, but only Dog Massa had him at the top of their list. Decent fielding profile, like the high work ethic and adaptability. Contact hitter is the primary skill of Van Ostren, but we think the gap power, the home run power, and the eye could all be acceptable. Not great speed, looking for slots. And then last, but probably not least, is Ken Griffin, the highest potential ceiling of any of the position players that we'll be talking about. He was projected to be off the board before any of these players with the 18th overall pick. And although I didn't mention for Van Ostran, he's supposed to go with the fourth supplemental first-round pick, so he should be off the board very shortly according to the mock draft. But Griffin at 18th overall is the guy who has lingered among all of the players we're going to be talking about, the longest on the market at this point compared to the expectations. Decent infield range, good potential error, arm, and turn double play ratings. Potentially a really good contact hitter with acceptable gap power, home run power, and eye. Decent speed, like the low financial ambition. Awful base running instincts, but those could probably be improved. The price tag, not too high. And in addition to our scout liking Griffin and his high potential, Griffin was ultimately the recommendation of veteran worldwide scouting department member Avery Shaham. But I did mention that pitchers were, on balance, the preference of most worldwide scouting department members. And there are four that we are going to talk about a little more deeply. One is the 18-year-old starting pitching prospect, Jimmy Yielding. Did not have any first-place votes from anybody, but could be an interesting second-round pick if he lasts. He's projected to go with the 18th pick in the second round, so it's very conceivable that he won't be available by the time we're making our second selection. But the right-hander with ground ball tendencies, think his velocity can get into the mid-90s. Think his stuff, movement, and control could all be a bit above average. Pretty good stamina. Decent-looking prospect who doesn't have a high demand. The other three pitchers that we're going to talk about all did get at least one, and in one case, very many first-place votes from the worldwide scouting department. Dan Patterson, 18-year-old, who potentially has incredible stuff with what could be a 5-pitch arsenal, including 4 top-notch pitches and an acceptable slider. I think the movement and control are both more in the average-ish range. Think that he could get the velocity up to the mid-90s. Really like the personality with high leadership, loyalty, and work ethic. The bonus demand of $1.1 million is not very high. Patterson is the recommendation of NS1 CLRK. Patterson, the only guy that we're going to talk about who lasted till the third round in the mock draft. He lasted till the 21st pick of the third round, so might be a bit of a reach to take him here at the end of the first round, but it's also somewhat conceivable that he is one of only, at best, a handful of these players who might be on the board by the time we go to make our second round selection. The clear number 2 choice among the worldwide scouting department is the college pitcher, Brian Stoops. He was projected to just go off the board recently with the 32nd overall pick in the draft. The New Mexico State product potentially has a 6-pitch arsenal, and honestly, with the exception of the changeup and the splitter, 4 of those 6 pitches are major league quality already. or not far off major league quality. We think his stuff and his movement could both be well above average. The control, he's got some work to do. 22 years old, only 35 control, and we think best case scenario is he gets up to average. High financial ambition, low leadership, and low loyalty. So not a perfect personality, but also not a completely destructive personality as far as his development, since the work ethic, adaptability, and baseball IQ are all kind of in the middle range for him. Good stamina, not great at holding on runners, but not awful. Stoops was ultimately the recommendation of Not My Floor Ply, DLL first base 14, Ian. But to be fair, Stoops was also strongly recommended against by NS1 CLRK, who, as we just talked about, recommended the high schooler Dan Patterson instead. As I mentioned, Stoops projected to go with the 32nd pick in the first round. And then last but not least is Matt Stream. And Stream is ultimately the choice of the worldwide scouting department. 18-year-old high school pitcher. Really like the stamina, and he has got a great potential pickoff move, or at least he's great at holding on runners. High adaptability, think that the velocity can get into the mid-90s. Potential 4-pitch arsenal, although he's definitely got some work to do, as you'd expect from a 18-year-old high schooler. Think the stuff could be exceptional if he reaches his full potential with above-average movement and control. Stream, the left-hander, was ultimately the recommendation of many members of the worldwide scouting department: Scott Donovan, Raymond Effinger, Kyle B., Rocket Skarmry, Mitch Vonstock, Tyler Crippen, Dog Massa, and Dustin Durbin all had Stream at the top of their lists. So as I mentioned, there was a lot more interest in pitchers than position players, and by far Matt Stream was the recommendation of the worldwide scouting department. Now, interestingly, when we think about Matt Stream, he goes later in the mock draft than just about everybody that we've talked about. And interestingly, he's actually projected to be our second round pick. So there is an argument to be made that if we really wanted to push the envelope in this draft, we could wait and maybe get Stream with our second round choice rather than the first round choice. I have found that the mock draft tends to underestimate when the pitchers are going to be picked, and generally have found over the last several seasons that some of the pitchers go a little earlier than I would anticipate if I was going purely by what the mock draft suggests. So although if there was a player that we were absolutely in love with, I think the strategy of waiting until the second round and trying to pick up Stream could make some sense. In this situation, there's no one that I'm absolutely in love with. So if I think that Stream is ultimately the direction I want to go, I think I just take him now and ensure I get him. I would say if I had to handicap things, probably like a 20 to 30% chance that Stream would still be available when we're picking with the 32nd pick. Could be wrong on that number, and if I decide to pick Stream with the first round pick, we'll never really know the answer to that. And even if we find out an answer to it, my probabilities still could be correct, whether he ends up on the board or he ends up taken before our 32nd pick. So ultimately, I think this is a year where even though I don't love anybody in the draft, given that everybody that we have talked about, except for Matt Stream and Dan Patterson, is expected to be off the board by our next pick, and Stream just barely makes it to us, and I tend to think he'll probably be picked earlier. I think we take our favorite prospect here in the first round, and then we just hope like heck that one of the other guys, or maybe perhaps a couple of the other guys that we've talked about, happen to fall to that 32nd pick. And if we're able to get two of these guys that we've talked about with our first two picks, even though it is not necessarily the most exciting draft I've ever seen, if we get two lottery tickets that our scout thinks have high potential when all is said and done, I think we could certainly do worse than that with the last picks in both the first round and the second round. And although our slot number for our first pick is about $3 million, this is a year where, if you looked at the front office screen when we first started the episode, we do have over $11 million in additional money available, in addition to the money that we've set aside, which is basically in line with slot. So we've got the ability to go over with our next few picks and likely get players signed. So I don't think demands are going to be a huge driver of our decision making. Ultimately, it comes down to a handful of players to me. I like Justin Van Ostran. I'm intrigued by Jeff Cheshire, even though I really dislike what a free swinger he is and how poor he is defensively. Kind of recognize that there are some very strong positive traits with him, with the personality, the durability, and the home run power and the eye. I don't anticipate either of those guys being around with our second round pick, but those are the type of guys who, if they did fall for some reason, could help turn this from a meh draft to a somewhat more intriguing draft. But if we're going to go with a position player, I do agree with Avery Sham that I think Ken Griffin is the direction I would go. I think the fielding from him can be good with a little bit of luck in the development lab. And I think the combination of good fielding with an outstanding contact hitter who's kind of average-ish at everything else is a prospect that is certainly worth considering. The OSA, interestingly, is not as high on him as our scout is, but as I noted, Griffin at 18th overall is the second highest rated player and the highest rated player that we're strongly considering who's still on the board if we assume that the mock draft has some merit, which is certainly something that's debatable. And then there's two pitchers that we're interested in. Certainly like the left-handed youngster, Matt Stream. The demand is kind of right in line with what we've reserved for our first round pick. Love the stamina and ability to hold on runners. I think that, as we talked about, if everything works out, his stuff, his movement, and his control could all be above average. And honestly, for an 18-year-old, his stuff and his movement are at a fairly decent level. Both of them already at 35, according to our scout. And clearly, as we talked about, Stream was the number one choice of the worldwide scouting department. And the guy who was the number two choice of the worldwide scouting department, Brian Stoops, is another guy that we are strongly considering. A little bit over slot, but $3.8 million is certainly a number that we could afford. Like the stuff in the movement, they're pretty much right where you'd want him to be for a 22-year-old, and think that his pitching arsenal could be very impressive. Don't love the personality traits, but as we talked about, none of those are absolute killers as far as his ability to maximize in his potential and hopefully reach his full development. But I don't love the personality, of course, and I am concerned about the number of walks that he could potentially give up with that control that's well below average now, and in a best case scenario, only average. And ultimately, as I think about what we're going to do in this draft, I have talked myself into doing something a little different than where I thought I was going to end up when we started off this episode. And honestly, where I thought I was going to end up just a few minutes ago before I started talking through the last 5 players. So we are going to go with a pitcher, which is following the suggestion of the Worldwide Scouting Department. I thought we were going to end up going with the high schooler Matt Stream, which is what the Worldwide Scouting Department ultimately recommended, and where I thought we would ultimately end up. As I noted, he's projected to come to us in the mock draft with our next pick, but I think it's unlikely that he actually makes it to us. But there is some, as I noted, maybe 20, 30, 35% probability that he lasts until our next pick, in which case we could make this draft a lot more interesting than it would otherwise be. Whereas Brian Stoops is already projected to be off the board, there's no way he's going to last until our next pick. And although I don't love the personality, and although I am concerned about the control, and although I am recognizing that NS1 CLRK provided a very thoughtful rationale for why he would essentially not touch Mr. Stoops at all until the later rounds. To me, the personality is not crippling, as we talked about. The control could be average, probably get him in the development lab this upcoming off season to work on that and hope for a good result there. And he does potentially have a 6-pitch arsenal, including an outstanding fastball and sliders, changeups, and sinkers that could all be well above average. So the stuff could be above average. We think he's got a great ability to keep the ball in the ballpark. He's almost major league quality in terms of the stuff and the movement. The stamina is there. Not great at holding on runners, but it's not the end of the world. But I think he could be a very high-end pitcher when all works out. He's a lot further along in his development than Stream. Stream's ceiling, certainly higher, but ultimately I'm going to go with Ian, DLL first base 14, and not my 4-ply here, and go with Stoops with our first pick. And I think we cross our fingers that Stream somehow falls to us with our 2nd round pick, which would be incredible if that happened. Dan Patterson, who was NS1 CLRK's recommendation, as we noted, is the only guy that we talked about projected to go in the 3rd round. So there's a decent chance that he makes it. I don't necessarily think any of the middle infielders that we talked about are going to still be on the board when it comes time for our next pick, but you never know. So we are going to go ahead with Brian Stoops, meet his demand for $3.8 million, so spend a little of the money that we've got set aside, an extra $800,000, and we will cross our fingers that something wacky happens and there's some interesting options for us with our 2nd round selection. And one of the pitchers we talked about, Jimmy Yielding, who was supposed to go with the 18th pick in the second round is still on the board. But not a lot of familiar names, unfortunately. So we'll go and see when pretty much all of the other guys that we talked about came off the board. Kay Ono and Justin Van Ostren were both taken with supplemental picks, and James Stangler, who we talked about as well, also off. Matt Stream, not surprisingly, also used with a supplemental pick, so he lasted just 6 picks after ours. I mentioned that felt like that final pick in the second round seemed unlikely for him, and ended up that way. Starting pitcher Brian Gable, who we didn't talk about but was also mentioned by the Worldwide Scouting Department, came off the board with the second pick of the second round. Jeff Cheshire, the second baseman, 9th pick. Scott Kennerly, another guy that we didn't talk about in this episode but looked at last time around, off the board with the 10th pick in the second round. Ken Griffin, the shortstop, lasted till the 15th pick, so he went almost a round later than anticipated. I think that's most of the guys that we talked about, although it's very possible that I missed somebody. So Dan Patterson, who is NS1 CLRK's recommendation, great personality, great stamina, potentially incredible arsenal. Control and movement, kind of meh, but there's time to try to improve those things, and we think his stuff could be absolutely lights out, so he's still on the board. And then Jimmy Yielding, who we also talked about, another high school pitcher, like the ground ball tendencies, like the stamina, potential 3.5 pitch arsenal, although that screwball we don't think really has all that much potential. Do think his stuff, movement, and control could all be well above average. Interestingly, some relief prospects that were also mentioned by the Worldwide Scouting Department that we talked about briefly in the last episode came off the board somewhat early for relief pitchers. Couple position players to talk about here with our second round pick. We mentioned Mike Diaz. He was projected to go 33rd overall, so still surprising that he's made it almost a full round later to the 32nd pick of the second round. As we talked about, really like the contact, gap power, speed, and durability. Really dislike the low power, the poor eye, the low leadership and adaptability, and the uninspiring glove. Another guy who was mentioned by the Worldwide Scouting Department is the college outfielder Noel Callies. Like the personality with the high work ethic. Like him defensively, although he's definitely more of a corner outfielder than the center field that he played in college. Really good speed, okay stealing instincts, poor base running ability. The contact and the gap power, both very interesting. The home run power and the eye, both less so. So it wasn't ultimately an awful situation with 3 of the 10 guys that we talked about at the start of the episode. The starting pitcher, Jimmy Yielding, the starting pitcher, Dan Patterson, and the shortstop, Mike Diaz, all being available for us here in the second round. Diaz, as we talked about, was expected to be off the board almost a round ago. Yielding was expected to be off the board 14 picks ago. And Patterson is projected to go with the 21st pick in the third round, and we're not picking till 27th. So although he's not expected to be off the board yet, this is most likely our last chance to potentially bring him on board. And I think that's the direction that we're going to go. Really like the potential pitch arsenal for him. Really like the personality. Definitely the movement and the control are both kind of meh if he reaches his full potential. But the personality with the work ethic in particular hopefully means he can maximize his development. 40 stuff for an 18-year-old high school pitcher is pretty darn well along in his development. And his curve, his splitter, and his cutter aren't far off major league quality. He's got some work to do in movement and control, but just about any high school pitcher is going to have a lot of movement, a lot of work to do at that age. So it'll be interesting how NS1 CLRK evaluates this draft, because he absolutely hated Brian Stoops for our first round pick, but he was the one and only member of the worldwide scouting department who had Dan Patterson on the top of his list. And ultimately we are going to go with Mr. Patterson here. In the second round. I don't think it's likely that Diaz or Yielding makes it to us in the third round, but I like Patterson a little bit better. So we're going to go ahead and meet that demand, and we've gone a college pitcher and a high school pitcher with our first two selections. And looking at what's happened over the third round since our last pick, Jimmy Yielding, the high school pitcher, went with the 6th pick in the third round to the Kansas City Royals. But one of the guys that we have been talking about throughout this draft pool is still available, and that is the shortstop Mike Diaz. Again, he was projected to go with the 33rd pick in the first round, and now he's made it all the way to the end of the third round. So not quite a Shedeur Sanders type drop, but definitely surprising. At this point, his $4.6 million bonus demand could be part of that. As we noted, this is a rare year where we got a bump to our budget right before the preseason, and didn't have anyone to spend it on in free agency, so we've got a little more flexibility to take on a guy with a bigger bonus demand in these middle rounds of the draft. As we've talked about, like the durability, really love the contact, gap power, and speed combo. Don't love the power in the eye, don't love the personality, don't love the glove, but the personality is not so toxic that we wouldn't pick a guy. To me, it's more an issue. Does he have enough of a bat to really play him at a position like third base? Clearly at 6'4", with those ratings, he could be a outstanding defensive first baseman. But I just don't think he's got a first baseman's bat. Although, to be fair, if the contact and the gap power are both off the charts, a different profile compared to most first basemen, but not one that is something to completely ignore. Noel Callie's also still available at this point if we wanted to go with someone who was further along in his development, and honestly a similar hitting profile where we think the contact and the gap power and the speed could be a great combination. The power and the home run eye a little bit meh. Like Callie's as a defensive player a little bit more, although he's playing less valuable positions in the outfield. And like his personality a little more as well. But before we make this decision, we're going to spend a little time offline checking out some of the other options that we do have available. And I did spend some time offline investigating some other options, and we've got now a new wish list of 4 pitchers and 3 position players who we're hoping maybe options over these next few rounds. On the pitching side, a couple of high schoolers, starting pitcher Pablo Alday, potential 4-pitch arsenal, although the change and sinker don't look like they're going to be particularly good. So not imposing stuff, but we think the movement and control could both be above average. Really good stamina, really good at holding on runners. Looking for much more than slot at this point at $3.4 million, which is perhaps why Mr. Alday has been sliding. And a similar situation is another high school pitcher, Matt Bear Barrel Rhines, also looking for $3.4 million. Really like the personality with high adaptability, work ethic, and baseball IQ. Another guy with above average stamina who's really good at holding on runners. Potential 4-pitch arsenal for Bear Barrel Rhines. Think that the stuff and the movement could be a bit above average, the control in an average-ish range. With those $3.4 million price tags, I think my hope would be that maybe one of those guys falls to the 4th or 5th round because other teams don't have as much money to spend. But Alday and Rhines, both guys that I'm going to keep an eye on. And then there's a couple of college relievers that are intriguing to me at this point. The closer, Dustin Gifford, out of University of Illinois at Springfield. Only a fair competition level, but his stuff and his movement aren't far off major league quality. Has some work to do with his control. From that perspective, sounds a bit like our first-round pick, Brian Stoops. The curve and the cutter are both close to major league quality. Some good personality traits. Not a lot of stamina, but he is good at holding on runners. Think he could be a pretty interesting left-handed reliever down the stretch looking for slots. And then Efren Pisano, kind of a right-hander with a similar situation. His stuff and his movement are further along with his control. Poor level of competition at Lycoming College. Another guy without much stamina, not good at holding on runners, but does have a high work ethic. We think he can reach triple digits as far as his velocity. Not going to go for any of these 4 pitchers here in the 3rd round, but certainly think that if they're still on the board in the 4th or 5th round, they could be intriguing options for us to consider. The position players, Diaz, another guy with a higher price tag that we might be able to wait on. I guess my thought with Diaz also is that for his $4.6 million price tag versus the $3.4 million price tag for the high school pitchers, I almost think I like the pitchers more just because they're kind of somewhat better balanced. Diaz has some great strengths, but definitely some concerns with him as well. Noel Callie's still on the market. Ultimately, I like him a little bit better than I like Diaz, simply because I think Callie's is just a 4-year more developed version of Diaz with a better personality and who's a better fielder. And Callie's also looking for only slot. But the guy that we're actually going to go with is another guy on this list, the shortstop Chris Dupree. And our scout actually recommends him at this point, and that's the direction we're going to go. Looking for $650,000, so a little under slot, I believe. Looks like he can be a competent major league hitter if he reaches his full potential. Good speed, and a guy who looks like he can play just about any position in the infield, not necessarily at an incredibly high level, but at a more than competent level. Could also play corner outfield for us down the line. Only going to have a lot of value if he reaches his full potential, but plus fielder with good speed. If the bat just gets to be a usable major league bat, I think that Dupree could be an interesting player for us in the future, and we're going to pick him here in the 3rd round, a little under slot, as we noted, and then hope that some of those other players continue to fall for us and give us some options that we are familiar with for the 4th round. And as we move to our fourth round pick, both Diaz and Callies are still available. I think I'll go with Callies if we're going to go with a position player, but the question now is whether any of those pitchers fell to us as well. And unfortunately, both of those high school pitchers were gone with that $3.4 million price tag. So a little bummer that was hoping that All Day or Rhines might fall to us in the fourth round, particularly because they had those higher price tags. But given that we went with a college pitcher and a high school starting pitcher, 1-2, not as huge a position of need. Do like both Gifford and Pisano, as I talked about. Ultimately, if I had to go with one of them, I think I like Gifford a little bit more. But it's close between the two of them. My hope is that one of them falls to the fifth round. But we're going to go with no Callies here. He's a guy, as I mentioned, that was noticed and recommended by the Worldwide Scouting Department, even though he wasn't on the top of the list. And I think among the Worldwide Scouting Department, it was Ian in DLL First Base 14 who were the biggest fans of Noel Callies, who probably have been shouting through their computers at me over the last round, possibly the last two rounds, to just take him. So perhaps really good value for us to get Mr. Callies here in the fourth round and see if perhaps Diaz continues to plunge to the fifth round, or if not, maybe one of the relievers that we talked about is still available. And looks like Diaz finally did go with that big price tag. So the question is whether one of the relievers is around. And both Gifford and Pisano are still here. So kind of like the value of both of them as a fifth rounder. Definitely different things to like about both of them. Pisano definitely throws harder out of that sidearm slot, which I don't necessarily love. They both have poor stamina, but Pisano is also poor at holding on runners. Does have high work ethic. Stuff in his movement dart far off, has some work to do with his control. The right-hander is certainly interesting. Dustin Gifford, a little older, a lefty. Fair competition level for him. Another guy with high work ethic, like some of the other personality traits as well. Doesn't throw as hard. Also kind of a one-inning guy, much better at holding on runners. His curve and his cutter are both a little bit further along, or at least one of those pitches is further along. Actually, that's not true. Must have been thinking about somebody else, but Pisano's actually a little more advanced with his fastball. Ultimately, we are going to go with Mr. Gifford. It's a close call for me. If Pisano's still around in the sixth round, that'll make it a real easy choice for us. But we're going to go with Dustin Gifford here in the fifth round. So two starters, a shortstop, a center fielder, and a closer in our first 5 rounds. And Pisano is still available, so we're going to add a second reliever here in the sixth round. And nothing all that interesting happened in the later rounds of the draft. We did reach for one player, a young Canadian, Harry Harkness. He's faced poor competition up in the Toronto area. But according to our scout, the batting profile isn't completely useless. Does have some positive personality traits. Looking for more than slot, but given that we do have some extra money this year, we are going to try to bring him on board as well, and hopefully get Stoops Callis and Gifford, the three college players, onto our A-ball team, although I think some or all of them are in the draft league. Yeah, Gifford is, Callis is, and I'm assuming Stoops is. Actually, Stoops is not, interestingly. So we'll get Stoops onto our A team as soon as we get him signed, where he can join BA and Hannibal and Murdoch and Face. And hopefully we can get the high schoolers signed as well and have them start preparing to make their professional debuts in rookie ball next year. And it hasn't been a great start to this month of July for us with a 3-5 record. We will sim through the next week and a half till we get to the All-Star break, and then finish things up by taking a quick look at who, if anyone, is available on the trade market, and what we might want to think about doing here in the final week and a half of the month before we get to the deadline. And we've got 3 of the 6 players that we had to make special offers to signed. Unfortunately, still waiting for Brian Stoops. Would love to get him into A-ball as soon as possible. Still waiting to hear from him. Have been playing slightly better since the last time we checked in. We've won 3 out of 4, 2 out of the last 3 against San Francisco, and then we just started off the homestand before the All-Star break with a big win against San Diego. Some other good news, Leo Martinez ready to begin his rehab assignment. He is finally healthy. Probably will try to give him 1 start over the next week, maybe 2 if he starts right away over the next week and a half in AAA. And then the hope is that he'll be back with us on the other side of the All-Star break at the major league level. And fortunately, things going pretty well since the last time we checked in. We ended up completing a 4-game sweep against the Padres at home, and took the first 2 against St. Louis before dropping the final game before the All-Star break. But we've gone 7 of our last 8 in terms of winning, although the 7-game winning streak was stopped by the Cardinals. We've now gotten all of our draftees signed, and either in a draft league team, the youngsters working out with our trainers, and then in the case of our first round pick, we sent Brian Stoops to Class A ball for us, where he'll hopefully be making his first start in the not too distant future. So as we prepare for the All-Star break, we will take a look at the standings, take a look at the All-Star teams, and then check in on who's available in the trade market. With our good play of late, we've opened up a 2.5-game lead on the Dodgers in the division, and our 61-38 record is the best in baseball. The Dodgers at 58-40 are the second best in baseball, however, so still potential situation where we win the division and we've got home field advantage throughout the playoffs, lose the division, and it's possible that even though we might have the second best record in baseball, we're playing in a wild card series. Gus Nieves continues to have a monster season for us, 33 homers and 92 ribbies at the All-Star break. The young... Actually, he's not that young. He just turned 30 at the start of this season. But I guess we'll call him a veteran DH/outfielder at this point, since he's now in his 4th major league season and he's 30 years old. He was the number 1 vote getter in all of baseball for the All-Star team, the first time that we've had that happen in this playthrough. Nieves also 3rd in the league in OPS. Nobody else on our team is near the top of the leaderboards. Take a quick look at the team statistics here. 61-38 record, a game above expectations, 11-7 here in July with the better play of late. Still 1st in the league in runs scored, and 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th in every offensive category. Defensive efficiency has regressed to middle of the pack, although we're second in zone rating. The pitching is fine overall, tied for sixth in the National League, but a lot of variability. First in bullpen ERA and second in home runs allowed, despite playing half our games in cores. But negatively, our starters' ERA is 12th, and we continue to rank last in the league in walks allowed. And with that strong performance by the team over the last week, not a surprise to know that we also had the NL Player of the Week. Shortstop Ezekiel Tovar, 11 for 23 with a couple homers, 8 homers, and 7 ribbies. Taking a look at the All-Star teams, the All-Star Games prospect roster announced. Hopefully we'll see some Rockies on that squad. Jervy Mahez, our first-round pick from a year ago on the team. Matt Waters, our first-round pick from the year before, also on the team, although I think their careers are likely headed in somewhat different directions. Waters, we see him as having very low potential. The OSA still likes him a lot, but nobody's willing to trade for him. So other teams must have an opinion closer to our scout. He's still inexplicably listed as the number 59 prospect in baseball. Other than us picking him 24th, I guess it was 2 years ago at this point, I don't know why he would be on this Future Stars game, because hitting just a $192 in 146 at-bats this year for us with our ACL team, whose season recently was completed. His WRC plus was a sickly -4. Jervy Mahez, however, our first-round pick from a year ago, played him in A-ball for just 14 games, where he raked with a 362 average and 11 extra base hits in just 14 games. Promoted him about a month and a half ago to high A ball, where he's hitting 325, 7 homers and 34 ribbies and 154 at bats. Even though we think he's ultimately going to be our third baseman, we've got him fully trained up at shortstop as well, and working on his second base skills just to get him as versatile as possible. Looking at his ratings, he's definitely capable of handling the Northwestern League, as we've seen. And he'd probably be fine in the Eastern League. Might wait until the end of the month, just see what he looks like then. But Jervy Mahez is hopefully not too far off from being able to help us in the majors. Like the speed, like the glove, the bat already has lost a little bit of the high-end potential that he might have had according to our scout, but think he could still be a pretty interesting infielder for us to supplement the roster with. And given that we've got a lot of older infielders who are getting more expensive, Mahez at some point in the 2032 season will almost certainly be on the team, and you never know what's going to happen over the next month and a half or so. No guarantees that he won't get a cup of coffee this year. Taking a look at the full All-Star Game rosters, and we'll focus, of course, as we always do, on our Colorado Rockies. We've got a couple of relievers made the All-Star team this year. Justin Gibson, former fourth-round pick out of Gonzaga in his second season, 2.86 ERA, and he's already pitched 56 2/3 innings. In addition to being our setup man, or one of 3 setup men we have, we also have been using him in that stopper role as a secondary role for him. And with 42 games and 56 2/3 innings pitched on July 21st, obviously our manager is using him as a stopper on a pretty regular basis. Our closer, Wellington Herrera, also makes the team, 1.73 ERA and 21 saves for the 27-year-old left-hander. After missing the team a year ago, Drew Romo named an All-Star now for the second time, hitting a even 300, in 260 at-bats, 106 WRC plus, and a 2.7 WAR on the season for our franchise catcher. Ryan Stone, the young first baseman who's been in a platoon role for us, playing against right-handed pitching, has been having a monster season against right-handed pitching. 309 average, 22 doubles, 7 triples, and 18 home runs. 142 WRC plus and a 2.5 WAR. Really looking forward to seeing what Mr. Stone can do over the course of his career. And the final and fifth All-Star for us, of course, is Mr. Gus Nieves, named an All-Star for the third time in his 4-year career, also trying to lead the National League in both home runs and ribbies for the third time in his 4-year career. He's put up a 3.7 WAR for us. Looks like he could be on his way to a career year. And given that as a rookie, he had over 50 homers and almost 140 ribbies, while not just winning the Rookie of the Year, but also the Most Valuable Player award. The fact that he's on pace for an even better season than his rookie season is definitely saying a lot. So while I like where we are as a team, we'll take a look at the whole list of players who are on the trade block right now. Not a ton of really true high-end pitching talent. We could trade for Jacob deGrom if we didn't mind a 43-year-old with a herniated disc who hasn't yet pitched in the majors this year. Logan Webb if we needed a starter. Is, at least according to our scout, the highest overall ratings out there. Has a 9-5 record with a 3.86 ERA for the Rangers, making $30.5 million this year with a team option for the same next season that presumably would be declined. Justin Martinez, a extremely high-end closer on the market from the Diamondbacks. 2.70 ERA with 20 saves on the season for Mr. Martinez. Quick look at some of the top position players who are available. We still have Gus Nieves on the block just in case, since we have been exploring what he could be worth in a trade now over this 4th year of his 7-year contract, given that he's extremely popular at this point, and most importantly, extremely productive. Not necessarily thinking we're going to be trading him anytime soon, but you never know. Aaron Judge having a solid year at age 39 for the Yankees. 286 average, 26 homers, 70 ribbies. I'm assuming he would not give up his no trade clause. Yeah, he's got his 10-5 rights and has no interest in leaving New York. 29-year-old second baseman Jordan Lawler certainly would be a interesting player to bring on board. 114 WRC plus, 3.3 WAR. So he's having a real good year, making $12.5 million, which we can afford. Headed to free agency, so he is a pure rental. I'm assuming the price for him from the Diamondbacks is going to be more than we'd be willing to spend on a rental. Yeah, and it looks like we definitely would have to give up one of the top players on our team or one of the better prospects in our organization to rent Lawler. Given how the team looks right now, I don't think that's going to be on the top of the list of things for us to consider, but we'll continue to explore the options available on the trade market over the next week and a half or so. If there's anyone who jumped out to the viewers, would love to hear about it in the comments to this episode. Otherwise, we're hoping that we will be getting Mr. Martinez back from his rehab assignment shortly to hopefully help our rotation. I think that the guy who's been our number one starter for the past several years, Jesus Luzardo, 2-5 with a 7.14 ERA, is the most likely to move to a bullpen role once Mr. Martinez is ready to come back on the other side of the All-Star game. But 5 All-Stars for our Rockies. We've got all of our draftees signed, even though it's only July 21st. And we've got the best record in baseball for hopefully a second straight season as we sit here at the All-Star break. So things are going pretty well in Colorado, and we'll find out what we decide to do as the trade deadline approaches in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.